This is looking under the floor pan now. What I've done now, I've drilled a pilot hole through about 1/8, and then I've used the drill bit, which makes it look like a spot weld. Little hole saw with a dowel on the end of it. Fantastic little thing it is. And then I've got a couple here, and then I'll go through and weld and plug weld. That'll plug weld that, so that'll reinforce that floor pan back onto the chassis. Now from the other side I had tech screws in it, and you can see where I've plug welded it from the other side for strength as well, removing, you know, one tech screw, having, you know, on the other side having plug welds as well. See arrows I'm putting on just in chalk, so to remind me to do it here and here. Then I go up in here to do as well. So just to get it finally finished off that way, and then once again it'll be even stronger than what it was before, especially when you've got overlapping welds, floor pan, etc. Little reminders, like a bit of a part there, we're going to have to plate that, make it neat, using chalk of course to remind you. Plug welds through the floor pans as well. Up in the corner I've got a little bit of a weld up there I've got to fix as well. And when that floor pan goes back on, it'll be up here somewhere, so I've got a little bit of a rip here I've got to fix. You can see where they've been pulling at it, so we'll fix it. Easy. Okay, looking at the underfloor pan, or where we replaced it, I've been through and I've put a heap of arrows. Just places I need to fix up, you know, what time I started. And then I've got, there was a few tech screws where we were holding it to the chassis, and then you've got the plug welds, which are fairly important to hold it down as well. Once again, plug welds. There's a little bit of a repair here, which is above the driver's side, which is left-hand drive vehicle. The floor pan's going to be cut about here somewhere. I fixed a hole here. Importantly, note where brackets are. Console, a couple of console screws here I'm not sure about, I'm not going to fix them up. But even though once you put the floor pan in, then there's always plenty of little holes to fix up. You know, you've got, you know, you might have put screws in there, tech screws to hold it in place, etc. So just a nice quiet morning, getting these in place. Yeah, just make yourself some notes as you go around. Yeah, so I've got to fix up some of the plug welds here weren't too good, so once I give them a grind, clean them up again. This is all going to have like a dyno mat over it, or some sort of sound deadening. In the old cars you get a lot of noise through the floor, firewalls, etc. So this one's going to be nice, quiet, good to drive, you know, stable on its feet of course, so yeah. This is looking at the floor pan right hand side where it comes out where the door closes. Now what I've done, looking up of course because we're on a rotisserie, I've drilled the bigger holes with a small pinhole on the other side there. These are going to be old, they look like spot welds, like plugged weld, so that way it'll hold that floor pan in place. Because what I was saying earlier with the floor pans, most Camaros and Mustangs, the original ones used to come up inside. And you can see inside where I drilled all these spot welds out before. And even though there was a hole there, what I've done, I've welded them holes up so I've got no leakage. I'll grind that flat later, and of course seam seal this whole joint along here. And that way it'll make it nice and clean, tidy, no moisture. And that way we'll be able to keep moving with the car, and then we'll get on the other side after this maybe. Alright, here we go. Driver side, left hand drive of course. Now this is the strut tower. Now I've cut this piece down so it goes in there, and I've also brought those back. Now underneath that I've actually used an anti-rust inhibitor, like a rust converter, and I've given it a coat with some zinc, World True zinc primer, but I've also flooded down inside the chassis where there were little holes, where there was a little bit of rust holes and stuff in there before, so that fits nice and tight now. So now the process is to tack it in place, keep moving forward. Once it's tacked in place, seam weld it all the way around, and then we'll put some seam sealer on it. I went through also as well this morning, and there's a couple of tech rivet holes that were here from previously holed, but anyway, they're all welded up now so I can grind them later. Yeah, so this is the left hand side, driver's side. Now, with that shock tower patch we put in the bottom of the in the chassis rail here, I welded it in, I stitched it in, welded it in, wiped it down with a degreaser like a wax and grease remover, because a lot of these panels you get have got like a diesel on them. You'll notice that when you start doing texture lines across them like I did when I was cutting it down, purely so they still look clean and not rusted when you get them as a spare part. So what we're going to do is give it a coat of this weld through primer. Very, just to keep the moisture off it, of course. I'll do the same as what I did on the other side. I'll do some holes along here and then use the little drill which we use for doing spot welds to drill through it, and then what we do is plug weld in each of the holes. There's about 3, so there's one chassis spot weld there, one there, one there, one there, one there. So we'll probably put about 4 along here, and that'll hold that side against it. And then what we'll do, that seam sealer stuff you got, you can read the can, they say it can go over the top of this stuff alright, save going on the raw metal. Inside the chassis, down where the hole was at the bottom here, there was rust. Yeah, just rust neutralised it, let it cure for a bit, and then gave it a good coat of that weld through primer again, hopefully stop a bit of that moisture getting in there again. But other than that, this is on the left hand side now, so the driver's side, because I've done the other side already, done the floor pan on the other side. So now it's just a matter of making our way across to this side here. The old floor pan on the other side there has been done. Yeah, out in the sunlight today, such a nice day, so yeah, once again, looks like the old stars in the sky at night there. So floor pan, might even mark that out today, might even do that if I get energetic. Alright, so that's the story behind the 65 fastback, coming along quite nicely. Okay, here we are on the left hand side now, which is the driver's side. I'm going to take out this floor pan section here using a spot weld remover drill bit. We've drilled a series of holes through the floor just with an 1/8 drill bit, and then of course don't want to rave too much, but this tool is the best. All you do is then just in the 1/8 drill bit, drill it out. You'll see a puff of like a little bit of brown come through from the rusted surfaces, through one skin. These ones are a little bit hard to spot, as you can see a little bit of rust here. So what you do is you just simply look from the bottom side, and on the bottom side you can spot them a lot easier, where before I couldn't see it on top of the seat. So I've got a heap of grinding to do today to clean up the other side there. I've got all my little arrows there, what I've done plug welding. Yeah, so moving on. I've done a bit of paint where we've etch primed that floor on the other side there. I just use a bit of black paint because once we get that seat put back in there, I won't be able to paint in there. But what I do when it comes to welding it back down again, I'll go along and grind off roughly where I'm going to be putting it together. Use that zinc primer, the weld through primer again, back on the spot welds, and then we'll be able to weld through. And of course with the base of the seat, I've painted the inside on the other side of course, but the underside of it as well. That way there'll be no chance of getting any rust on that again later. It's somewhere you're not going to be able to get to. This pan's going to come out. It's not because we've got rust back here or anything, but I want to do a small chassis repair back up in here as well, which is where they must have had it on some sort of a pan or some sort of stretcher where they've ripped the chassis here. And there's this little thing here, this is quite annoying, little dents in the floor pan. So I'm going to take that floor, that seat mount out, just so we can actually fix that. Fix this here, of course. Yeah. So it's getting there slowly, once again. Now this is the seat mount just been taken out of the car, but you can see the job that the spot weld drill bit does. So it drills around it, then all you do is you grind it flat and you've only got like an 1/8 hole at the bottom there, which we'll use when we put the seat back on there. We can just plug weld it back again. Such a good job, that thing. So yeah, I've just vacuumed it out. Once again, it looks like it's galvanised rails in this thing, or chassis rails here. But the other side we painted anyway, but we'll grind it back and put that one back in a minute. But this is the little dent I want to get out of it here. and then we'll cut that floor pan back to the other side. It matches it, you know, matches it through here somewhere, so it matches up again, marries up through here, and then from underneath it'll look right. So, but once again, just leaves a small hole, 1/8 hole here in the middle of the drill, and those spot welds. There. Now what I've done, removed the floor pan, leaving most of the structural firewall in place. This is the driver's side, so we've got brake booster that goes up in here as well, steering column, etc. So what I've done now, I've removed the thing, the floor pan, rusted floor pan. That'll enable me now to get inside the chassis here, repair this rip that they had a chain on. There's a dent here, I'll push that back down. I'll do similar to the other side, I'll put a plate in here, out to about here somewhere I reckon, both sides of it. A good 3 or 4 mil plate, that way there's plenty of strength back in it. Weld these back up. This metal's been stretched, so I have to bring it back together. But so far, the front part of the floor pan, nice fit. Now the second part of it is I'm going to tech screw that in place a bit more. Of course, the second part of the floor pan goes in, but then we're going to have to trim this down here, across here somewhere. Cut it off across here too, because with these pieces they've put in the side here, they tend to ripple along here. I did that on the other side. I took a piece off down about here somewhere, and that enabled me to bring that back flat and flush. Yeah, once again, this side was probably a little bit more work than the passenger side in this case, but yeah, getting there. All that seat mounts out, the other side of the seat's painted black. Give a bit of sealing under it. But I'm going to put a couple of tech screws in here to hold this in place, up in here now, so there's no gap at all there, so they fit quite well. I won't put anything down underneath here because that way I can't put the secondary pan, so I won't put one into the chassis there and there. I'll put one up into here. There's a little bit of a chassis up in here. I'll put one into there, and then I'll work out where we're going to cut this one off here. So more than likely it'll be back here somewhere, I reckon, on the flat. That way that joint will be back here somewhere across here. Okay. Okay, this is the seating floor pan, because what we've done, we replaced the lower front and the firewall front floor pans. What I've done, I've painted them underneath in good strong black after using a rust neutralizer on the floor pan, also underneath the seat, because that was never actually coated with anything. So now it's been done. All the tabs have been flattened off again and ground. I've ground this away, the black. What I'll do before I do it, I'll put some weld-through primer down again across here. What I've ground, I'm going to weld, and then this piece here will be going back in, and of course we'll be lining up the holes from where those plug welds were. I'll put a few tacks in there to hold it in place while I stitch it back in place. This here, there's no holes on the bottom side as well, because that's all been replaced through there. Re-weld those tabs. There's a couple of spots along here. These are actually just MIG'd back in the day. So, and then same with back in on the, what I often call the rocker panel, or the sill panel across here. But yeah, so the next thing to do now is give it a coat of weld-through primer, get that seat put back in, that seat mount put back in, and then of course we'll go on back onto the other side again to do the lower floor in the front floor panel, and of course the seat there as well. All that's got to be rust neutralised, because that never got sandblasted. But note the colour on the rocker panel, or the sill panels there, it looks like galv, but I think when there's sandblasted it's knocked the galv off anyway, so strange. I don't know, I've never seen it before. I'm not a professional, so I don't know. Now I've got the seat, base of the seat panel sitting in at the moment, using the bocce bar to line up my holes that are originally drilled there for when I took the spot welds out of it, and I'll use that as I go along and screw it in place. I gave it a shot over with a bit of primer, of course, and then what we'll do is just weld through stuff. Also remember, in between too, give it a vacuum after grinding. You know, nothing worse than having grind bits of grinding metal in your paints, so just vacuum in between. So what I do now, I'll a few tech screws to hold it down, maybe give it a bit of massage if it needs a bit of work, but it looks pretty good. It goes right back in the same spot again. You can see the resemblance in the background where there was a bit of a thing there, so should be good. Alright, we'll keep moving from here, but other than that, come along nicely. Okay, the seat as a part of the floor pan, the seat riser is actually in. Just stitched it along there, plug welded along here, and it fitted really well. Look, it's sit up against the floor pan below, quite good in fact. Just ran over with the grinder, took a few nibs of things off it. Now I'll just give it some primer. We're getting one step closer, but now that's nice and secure now. But yeah, other than that, that's it. Okay, this is the chassis on the left hand side, driver's side, where they actually had a chain through there. This was all dented down, so what I've done, I actually cut it, slitted it, we'll put it flat again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to weld all this up here, and then like the same as I did on the other side here, I'll put a plate in behind it, which will go along here. It's about a 3 or 4 mil plate with another hole in it, well, with a bit of damp coursing between it, so I don't get any more moisture between the two surfaces. I've also straightened up this chassis here. That was all bulged in where someone may have put a jack under it and pushed it up in, who knows. And also where the plates were welded, there was a couple of plates welded on the side here. Big 90-degree plates for some reason. There was a rip in the bit of a chassis here, so what I've done here, I've welded it, but at the same time I've put a piece in behind it. So then I've just tacked that, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's been tacked in here as a plate. So yeah, so moving along. Floor pans have been in there and they've been taken out again. They've all been tech screwed in place to make sure they suit, fit, and that'll be on there this afternoon. Alright, what we've done this morning is we've fixed up that chassis. That chassis had a couple of dings in it, we brought it back down again. We've all primed inside there with some weld through primer. We've put a plate inside as well where we brought that down. Where we showed earlier there was a bit of a rip in that chassis. And now what we're going to do is move around to the front here. Before the floor pans can go in, we've got a bit of a hole here we've got to fix. Then do that. And then started cleaning off where the seats were. And then the chassis. We had a bit of a problem here, we fixed up as well, hence the arrows. Moving along, there was a couple of little dents. That's the hole we fixed up, where the chain hook was through it, where they must have put on a stretcher at some stage. So yeah, so now on the other side there's floor pan. We've had the floor pans in it. Just fix this hole up here, we're going to cut it out and replace it. Now this is that patch we were doing in behind the mud guard on the left hand side, driver's side. All ground in now, nice and tight. We did a bit of a repair here as well, bit of a repair there, and that triangle piece that we were looking at before. We'll just give it a quick coat of the old primer. Whoa, that's pretty. Pretty in pink, that one.
Like a high fill primer.
It's like a high fill primer.
Not though.
No, etch primer. Anyway. Oh, it changes colour as well, mate. Alright, so what we'll do now is we'll just work on the inside of that, where we had a bit of penetration through. We did too. I don't know whether you can see that or not, but good penetration through there. We'll give that a bit of a grind and a clean up and a prime as well, because that's where the floor pan has to come through. And the floor pan actually welds that part there, and that's where that rust started from originally. So, yeah, so much for the old primer. It's all good. Alright, what we've done now, we've spot welded the floor pan in, lower part of the car, plug welded the chassis, even though it's still tech screwed. Same with here, plug welded it, still tech screwed, plugged again. Across the join, around the front, married up beautifully, of course. All the work we've put into it. Once again, the gaps are good. And the same with across the front of the firewall part there. Looking, this is on its side, of course. You can tell if I move out. Yeah. So now what I gotta do now? Stitched on the inner, and then I'll go around and I'll totally stitch the whole lot, and make sure the chassis goes back on with all these plug welds. All right.